Okay. Hi, Kelly. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Doing fine. Thank you. Thank you for coming on the show. Nice to have you with us.
Thanks so much for having me.
So, first off, New York Times best-selling author. Congratulations for that.
Thank
And
you.
it looks like you've got quite a few books. Are all these titles Front Desk, Parachutes, Three Keys, Rooms to Dream, New from Here? Those are all your previous books, right?
Yes.
Okay. Are they all children's books?
Yes, they're all children's books. Some are middle grade. I primarily write middle grade. Some are young adult. And then I have one picture book. Yes, we will.
Have you been a published author for your whole life of a career, or did you do something else first?
I did something else first. So I was actually a writing teacher for about 15 years. I taught kids how to write, and I also taught them debating. So that was my first career. And then I ventured into being a novelist.
Okay, well, you were sort of in the same sort of realm, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, because I know a lot of people that have come on my show who, they were a lawyer for 20 years or something, and then they decided to give that up and pursue their passion for writing. But for you, your passion for
I
writing,
did actually.
oh, go
Well,
ahead.
I was a lawyer. I went to law school, and
Okay.
then I decided that I didn't want to practice. Instead, I wanted to teach kids how to write. So that's what I did. And then I decided I also wanted to become a writer myself.
Were your parents influential in pushing you towards being a lawyer, or did you think that maybe you should do that on your own because it's difficult to make a living as a writer?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I went to college at a really young age. So by the time I went to law school, I was only 17,
Oh,
and I was a
wow.
little too young to just join the workforce, I guess. So I decided that I wanted to get, graduate school education. And law school seemed like a good fit at the time. I'm pretty argumentative, so it seemed like a good idea. But what I quickly realized was the job of being a corporate lawyer, you didn't really get to do much creative writing in that. In fact, if you did, you'd probably be disbarred for making up facts. So I didn't think it was like actually that great of a fit for me, having experienced it. And I remember telling my law firm, hey, you guys, can you just give me 1 year? I'm going to try this thing out. I'm going to try to be a teacher. And they were like, what? And I said, yeah, I just love writing and I love kids. So let me try this thing out and see if I can make it as a writing teacher, even though I had no teaching credential of any kind. But they let me go and try that, and I just never went back.
You went to law school at 17?
Yes, I did.
That is amazing because most people in law school would be what, 21 at least?
Yes, most people are 21, 22. Sometimes you would even have people in their late 20s and early 30s.
So, is there a particular theme that runs through all of your children's books?
I think the running theme is finding the courage to speak up, even though sometimes that might be hard when you're new to a country or you're new to a situation or you're in the middle of a pandemic. So all those circumstances might be different, but finding that well of courage that I think is in all of us, but it's sometimes hard to tap into, especially when you're in a difficult situation. That's sort of a running theme.
Was the inspiration to start publishing children's books from your students that you were teaching writing to?
Was actually from my own kids. I became
Oh, from
a
your own kids.
mom,
Okay.
and I have three kids, Elliot, Tilden, and Nina. And when my oldest was 8 years old, I kind of looked at him one day and I realized that he had no idea how I grew up. And that's because my whole life I've kept it a secret up until then. And the secret was that I grew up living and working in a motel with my parents. We worked in three different motels in Southern California. That was just a job that we could find as new immigrants to this country. And I never saw that in any of the books that I read as a kid. So after a while, I decided I am not going to tell anybody at school because my life is so different from everybody else's life. I don't have a two-story house. I don't have a golden retriever. I don't go watch movies on the weekends with my parents. I'm always working. I don't go anywhere on summer vacations. I started thinking that must be really different and weird. So I should keep it a secret. So I never told anybody growing up about my real life. And when I became a mom, I kind of looked at him and thought, that's really ridiculous that I don't tell anybody, because it was actually kind of a magical childhood. And so I decided in that summer, the summer of 2015, to sit down and tell him about my childhood in the form of writing a book.
Well, I think that's an amazing childhood, and I suspect that having that sort of an upbringing was partially to blame for you getting into law school at 17. Because if you had grown up in the two-story house with the golden retriever, you might not have been as motivated.
Maybe, yeah. I mean, we moved around so much that I think that was the main motivator for me to skip grades and go to college early, as I just wanted to be in one place for a little bit longer than just a few months. Working in all those motels is a very transient life. You know, the owners of the motels are always trying to sell them and find new managers, and so you're just constantly moving. So I was sick of that, and that motivated me to skip a bunch of grades and basically go on a totally different trajectory.
Let's pivot over to your latest book, and we want to get that in. Finally Seen. And the first line on one of your talking points says, takes on censorship and intolerance. Was one of your motivations for this a book that you had experienced or read that was censored? Or tell us a little bit of that story.
Yeah, so the book that I wrote for my son, Front Desk, ended up being this huge blockbuster hit. You know, people were reading it all over the country. And so many kids, thousands and thousands of kids, would email me constantly telling me how much the book made them feel so seen. Even though it was based on my childhood living in the motel, it really resonated with them. They connected with the story. But one day, out of nowhere, I got this tweet that the book was getting banned in a school district in New York. And I was devastated. I couldn't believe this was happening. I felt really embarrassed to have written a story that was not allowed to be read anymore. I thought maybe I did something wrong. You know, it triggered all those feelings growing up as a kid and wanting to hide parts of my life and thinking now finally people read about my life, and sure enough, they don't like it. And it just made me feel like I was, 8 years old all over again, worried about telling anyone at school something truthful about myself. So that was a really hard experience to go through as an author. But I did a lot of soul searching, and I just kind of thought about it. And I realized I have nothing to be embarrassed about. What happened to me was something that I just did the best I could, right? I wrote a story for my son about my authentic life as an immigrant child, just trying to do my best in school. What is so embarrassing about that? And so I decided that I wasn't going to be embarrassed about it. I was going to talk about it publicly. So I started speaking out very publicly against book banning. And I decided that I was going to, turn lemons into lemonade and make this new book, Finally Seen, about a girl who finds herself in a book and then sees the book getting banned and has to decide what she's going to do about it.
Why did they ban your book to begin with? What was the excuse?
That's a great question. I mean, the book that I wrote, Front Desk, is based on my childhood experiences. A lot of those experiences were hard. Growing up as an immigrant in this country, it's not always easy. Not always easy, and you sometimes get teased at school for the things you wear, for the things that you're eating for lunch, things like that. And I guess some parents thought that it was inappropriate to learn about that, or maybe it was not relatable. It does mention racism. It does touch on these topics that so many kids deal with. It's just a reality for so many of us in this country. And of course, it was a reality for me growing up. So I wrote about that. I wrote about having to deal with racism, having to deal with discrimination, learning about it, understanding it, because I was coming from China where a lot of people look just like me. So I never had experienced racism before, really understanding what that's all about. Those are things that I talk about in Front Desk. And some people felt that talking about racism it's not acceptable. It's un-American.
I think that's ridiculous. I think that
Yeah, I agree. I think banning books
is
even more
ridiculous too.
un-American.
That's totally against what we stand for in this country. Is the book still banned, or did you get it unbanned?
So in that particular district in New York, we were able to get it unbanned. And I know that in other districts, we've also been able to get it unbanned. But if you were to ask me where it's banned exactly today, I wouldn't even be able to tell you, because that's just how many book bans we've seen across the nation. We've seen book bans in numbers that have never happened before. I mean, thousands and thousands of bans across so many states. It's just so hard to keep track of now. And especially with everything going on in Florida and Texas, there are laws that are saying, hey, you can't have any other book except for the few that are on this list that are officially approved. Then pretty much every book is kind of going to get banned.
Well, it's a snowball effect. I mean, we've seen this historically in other countries for centuries, where they start banning this type of book, then it's this type, then it's this type, and then pretty soon there's nothing left to read at all, except for the government manifesto that they want you to read. So, yes, it goes against the whole founding principles of the United States, freedom of the press. And if a book offends somebody, don't read it. It's that simple.
It's exactly right. And if you think about schools, right, the point of schools is to prepare kids for the future. Well, we know that the future workplace is diverse because we know that the current workplace is already diverse. So how are kids going to know how to deal with people from all different cultures, all different walks of life, if they're not allowed to read about anybody else's experience, right? That doesn't make any sense to me. And I think it's an attack on public education.
It's also an attack on diversity, which public education seems to be so gung ho about promoting, which I'm fine with. But there seems to be a bit of a hypocrisy there when you start telling people that they can't read this and can't read that. But they never gave you a specific reason why your book was banned. They just said inappropriate. That's so general.
Yeah, they said it was divisive.
Divisive.
Basically, I think they were saying that it made people feel all these intense emotions, which is the whole point of a good book, is to make you feel. And I think rather than it being divisive, it's a conversation starter. It's something that you can go and talk to your parents about and understand, things that it's hard to talk about. It's hard to talk about racism. It is hard to talk about the complete disparity in income in this country, and the fact that some people are struggling just putting food on the table because food is so unbelievably expensive these days. I know those are conversations that are hard to talk to with our kids, but they're important conversations, and they're also essential for so many kids going through them.
Absolutely agree. Well, listen, we do have to wind this down. We are out of time. Thank you so much for coming on. The book is called Finally Seen. My guest is Kelly Yang. Is the book out now and available?
It's out tomorrow.
Oh,
I can't
perfect.
wait for you guys to check it out.
Okay, so tomorrow's the launch. And give out your website, please.
Yeah, you can find me at kellyyang.com and on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok at kellyyangHK.
All right, super. Well, thank you so much. It was nice meeting you, and best of luck with your book. I hope it does well.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.